This audiobook is entitled The Dragon and Chips Trilogy and includes all 3 novels of the series written by Simon Haynes and narrated by GM Graeme Hague. This audiobook is entitled A Portion of Dragon and Chips, written by Simon Haynes and narrated by GM Graeme Hague. It is Book 1 of the Dragon and Chips Trilogy. Chapter 1. Rank Arborman, High Priest of Chatter's Reach, stood at the window of his opulent apartment, shivering in the night-time cold. He wore the black robes, lead-plated chain, wooden sandals, leather armbands, green sash, and bronze-plated headpiece afforded his exalted position. But given the amount of time it took him to get dressed every day, he sometimes wished he'd taken up some other calling, like acting. The headpiece was fashioned from a single cast, with mounting holes around the base intended, in less enlightened times, to literally screw the heavy device to the wearer's skull. It was supposed to mark the high priest out in a crowd, something it achieved with a huge degree of success, given the headpiece evoked an oversized pair of rabbit ears, one of them tilted forward to give the impression the wearer was listening intently. The origins of the device were lost in the mists of time, but apparently a miserly king of the era had sacked all the proofreaders in the land, declaring them a waste of money. So when a motion came before the High Chamber, instead of suggesting a headpiece that would lend an air of gravitas to the High Priest, it instead recommended a headpiece which would lend him a hair of gravitas. Repercussions of the king's unwise move were not limited to funny headgear. Indeed, the monarch's tomb, slowly crumbling with the passing years, still bore his subjects' well-meaning epitaph. Here lies King Tapo, beloved of all. May he rest with angles. Ironically, burial custom of the time required that kings and queens be interred in a sitting position, so the epitaph was more accurate than even the High Chamber intended. Arborman shivered again. There was no glass in the window, which wasn't surprising because panes of glass hadn't been invented yet, and thus a strong salt-laden breeze cut through his ornate robes as though they were fashioned from gauze. He gathered the robes tighter, trying in vain to warm his bones, and looked out onto the city. His suite was on the top floor of a converted bell tower. The bells were long since gone, melted down to forge weapons for some long-forgotten war, and the view from the window was breathtaking. Torches and lanterns flickered in the darkness below, their dim glow barely illuminating the streets and alleys. Further in the distance he could see the first of the city walls, where moving specks of light revealed the guards patrolling the battlements. He'd often wondered whether that was wise, since it gave a concealed enemy something to aim a bow at, but he'd been assured that, statistically speaking, they lost fewer guards to occasional arrows than they did from guards taking a wrong turn in the darkness and plunging to their deaths. So the lights stayed. There was a rustle of bed-sheets behind him, and Arborman smiled. The lass warming his bed had been particularly vigorous, as promised, and he decided she would receive her second tip of the night when she left. Arborman shivered again, and was about to turn away from the window and engage in more warming pursuits when he happened to glance down into the town square. An elaborate wooden stage had been constructed in the centre, with lanterns hung from poles illuminating the large chopping block which had been brought up from the cells for tomorrow's executions. The timbers of the stage were fresh and raw, but the chopping block was streaked with dried blood, black and foreboding in the darkness. The lanterns would be taken down at dawn, the poles ready to receive their new and far more grisly decoration as each execution took place. The woman said suddenly, interrupting his sombre thoughts, "I thought this kind of thing was banned for priests." Arborman knew what she meant, but he shrugged off the question. "It is not written so." "But the teachings of Zephyr clearly state that fornication—" "Do you presume to lecture the High Priest on such matters?" "I've got a copy of the Windfast," said the woman doggedly, "and I can read." "Is that so?" Arborman turned to face her. She was sitting up in bed, naked to the waist, and with a sudden stirring he'd realized she'd probably get more than 2 tips that eve. "Which edition do you possess?" "I don't know, do I? It's got half the pages missing, but the bit about priests is pretty specific." "Does it mention magic, perchance?"
Sample complete. Ready to continue?